ngubawo umoya wokumanisa makama amatatu enyukivana Yesu isile kosini umoya wokumanisa makama amatatu enyukivana Yesu isile kosini umoya wokumanisa makama amatatu usanu kujidileka kituniwe ngubawo umoya wokumanisa makama amatatu usanu kujidileka kituniwe ngubawo umoya wokumanisa makama amatatu enyukivana Yesu isile kosini umoya wokumanisa makama amatatu enyukivana Yesu isile kosini umoya wokumanisa makama amatatu usanu kujidileka kituniwe ngubawo umoya wokumanisa makama amatatu.
Nelson Mandela.
King is from King.
Nelson Mandela.
Mandela.
Nelson Mandela.
Mandela ukholo.
Nelson Mandela.
Mandela.
The Speaker of the National Assembly, the Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, the Deputy Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Members of Parliament, guests, kindly remain standing. The parliamentary choir will now lead us in the rendition of the national anthem.
Ngosikeleni Afrika maluphakanyiswa ukhono lwayo izwa imithandazo yethu Nkosi sikelela thina lusapho lwayo murena buluka sichaka sa Yesu ufedise tintwali matswenyeho usibuluke sishabasa
opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. Please be seated. Order. Honorable members and guests, the presiding officers have called a joint sitting of the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces in terms of Joint Rule 7.2 in order to pay tribute to our first democratically elected president of the Republic of South Africa, Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, who passed away on the 5th of December 2013. I wish to recognize the presence of the Mandela and Sisulu families in our midst in the gallery. Thank you for being with us. We're honored to have you here today. I also wish to recognize the presence of the Acting Chief Justice, Judge Dikgang Moseneke, and the Honorable Loide Kasingo, Third Vice President of the Pan-African Parliament. I further wish to recognize the presence of struggle veterans and representatives of the various religious formations and members of the public in the gallery. I now wish to invite the Honorable, the Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa to address this joint sitting, the Honorable, the Deputy President.
Honorable Speaker of the National Assembly, Mr. Max Sisulu, Honorable Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Mr. Mninwa Mahlangu, the Acting Chief Justice, Judge Dikgang Moseneke, Honorable Members of the National Assembly and the NCOP, Honorable Premiers here present, the Sisulu and Mandela families, fellow South Africans. Honorable Speaker, I am at once deeply honored and sad to stand in this joint sitting of Parliament today to give tribute to a leader whose name fires up human imagination with images of heroism, deep convictions, and consistent striving for high ideals, our former President Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. Remarkably, a week ago, our nation buried Mr. Reginald September, another liberation struggle luminary and former member of Parliament. Today, we are also laying to rest the remains of yet another member, former member of Parliament, and a man with deep roots in South African liberalism, Mr. Colin Eglin. It would seem as if Madiba said to both Mr. Edling and Mr. September, "You will never walk alone. I am right behind you." Now we hear that our nation has suffered yet another loss, the death of boxing legend Jacob "Baby Jake" Matlala. Similarly, Baby Jake's passing on seems to point in the same direction, with him saying to Madiba, "You will never walk alone, I'm right behind you." I would rather view the deaths of all these South African giants in a positive light, not because this is the best way to lessen the effects of mortality, but because the four have made emphatic contribution to our nation that has left us the richer for it. We thank them for lives well lived. Honorable members, the sheer weight of current historical experience is daunting. Reflecting on the full sweep of history covering the life of Nelson Mandela is almost impossible. What is possible and desirable is to look at the meaning of Mandela's life for us as South Africans, as Africans, and indeed the whole world on which he has left a deep and enduring impression. At this very moment, our nation, and indeed the world, is undergoing an epochal experience where history ending and history making intersect in ways rarely seen before. As the one chapter is closing on the life of this lovable revolutionary, another is opening, prefaced by the question whether Mandela's remarkable contribution to human progress will simply pass into historical memory like that of great men and women before him, or whether it will occasion a leap of faith in those with the power to make a difference to the abject social experience of the overwhelming number of the world's people in whom Mandela's life was bedded. This new chapter imposes imperatives on all of us, governments, continental and world bodies, as well as private capital, and all individuals who have the means to work for a meaningful social emancipation of the peoples of the world. Clearly, the instinctual global outpouring of raw passion of sorrow, anguish, eulogies, encomiums, laurels, and love unleashed by the death of Nelson Mandela has reaffirmed the deep common yearnings shared by humanity across spatio-temporal divide. As a global figure, Nelson Mandela's vision transcended the physical borders of our country. It permeated the fabric of global society and is as true of our nation as it is of the entire world. It was Mandela himself who taught us that, and I quote, "No one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin or his background or his religion. People must learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite," close quote. This transcendent universality unfolding at this point in history resonates with the poignant contention of yet another great freedom fighter and one of the inspiring figures of the 20th century, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who reminded us, and I quote, "Our loyalties must transcend our race, our tribe, our class, and our nation. And this means we must develop a world perspective," close quote. Nowhere is this world perspective in clearer evidence than right now, when global pathos is loosened in memory of the unifying figure of Nelson Mandela. In a true sense of the word, he belongs to all humanity. For to claim his ideals only for ourselves, to the exclusion of the rest of the world, would be an exercise in provincialism. Mandela's ideals saturate the face of the earth. I am therefore honored to stand here today to say my piece on the life of a man of whom the poet would have said, in a modern sense of the old-fashioned word, he was a saint. In equal measure, I am sad to have to bid farewell to this saintly being who considered himself not a saint but a sinner who keeps on trying. While fallible as flesh and blood like the rest of us, he exhibited an inimitable human personality that defied the limitations of his age. Looking back, we know now that it is within the realm of possibility to push back the frontiers of atavism, ignorance, prejudice, and resentment, as well as racialized and gendered poverty that cast the lot of many into misery. The world over, his name has evolved into a metaphor. The name Nelson Mandela has entered the pantheon of history's sages, becoming a shorthand for imperishable trans-historical values that define human progress. This would explain why people of all backgrounds, nationalities, gender, age, regions of the world have suddenly succumbed to a sweeping feeling of sorrow that comes with the loss of a life that enriched the human experience. In an age where the best lack all conviction and the worst are full of passionate intensity, the figure of Nelson Mandela emerged in history, along with others, driven by a conviction to reclaim human dignity for the oppressed in a nation where history has imposed a common destiny among its people. As mortality takes a hand in the matter, reminding us once again of the fragility of the human condition, the immortality of Nelson Mandela, Koi Valley thrusts itself forth with defiance, etching into historical consciousness the force of the meaning of his life. This immortality will echo down the ages. So, Honorable Speaker, Honorable Chairperson, I stand here aware that no language on earth is capacious enough to capture faithfully the depths of the pain fate has inflicted on us. It is a pain we all knew would come, yet not even the possession of foreknowledge could prepare us for the force with which this actuality has struck us. Equally, though, it is the measure of Nelson Mandela's mystique that the same reason that engenders sorrow in us for his passing away equally fills us up with happiness for having shared a life with him. Indeed, we have a reason to be happy, as the spontaneity with which thousands across the globe celebrating Mandela's life shows. It is not in every generation that a figure of mythic proportions emerges from relatively unremarkable social conditions to stamp his imprint on the course of history. As a metaphor, his life mirrors a Copernican revolution, a sense of Copernican revolution that represents the path of reason and enlightenment in the face of a primeval climate of racial oppression which, among others, expressed itself in insufferable economic conditions for the majority of South Africans. Yet, while historiography may struggle with issues such as whether it is individuals or the masses of people who make history, we whose lives were lived through the historical events of the 20th century, South Africa, know that the Mandela phenomenon is unthinkable outside of its historical setting. We know that Nelson Mandela was forged by the social conditions in which he was born, and that his political consciousness was forged by the furnace of historical experience. James Baldwin may very well have been anticipating the Mandela phenomenon when he memorably contended that, and I quote, "I am what time, circumstances, history have made of me, but I am also much more than that. So are we all," close quote. Honorable members, Nelson Mandela's dream did not end with the 1994 democratic breakthrough in our country, nor has it ended with his passing. His dream of building unity, democracy, non-racialism, and non-sexism only started to gain traction when, for the first time, all South Africans exercised the right to vote for the government based on their will. The litmus test, however, is whether inheritors of his dream, heirs to his vision and adherents of his philosophy, will be able to make the dream for which he lived come to pass in the fullness of time. After the outpouring of grief, the celebration and reflection on Nelson Mandela's life, we will have to answer the question as to how we advance towards that dream. If we succeed in bringing his dream to fruition as we should, that will inspire the rest of the world along the same path. A legitimate expectation that the world has of us is that if we can produce a Nelson Mandela, we can bring about a progressive historical period where all the ills of the past recede into distant memory. In consequence, it is the obligation of all South Africans aspiring to lead society to ensure that on their watch, the Mandela experience does not fizzle out into an episode without consequence or a flash in the pan, but rather becomes a turning point in how the world advances social change. Ultimately, as we move forward to the future, the most enduring monument we can build to his memory is to strive for unity and human solidarity, to conquer the hidebound thought systems such as racism and sexism, to eradicate social inequalities, educate the masses, make health accessible to all, and uphold a human rights culture. For us in South Africa, the challenge looms even larger when one considers the inevitable possibility that posterity will always look at us in the light of the Mandela experience. If we fail, it will not make sense to future generations that while Mandela emerged from the mist of history to evolve into a rugged moral force that edged humanity a notch higher on the plane of civilization, those who followed him either failed to live up to the dictates of the philosophy he advocated or simply destroyed his dream. A post-Mandela South Africa will be looked at in terms of how it fares in uprooting the legacy of apartheid system at both the material and metaphysical level, while mindful of the symbiotic relationship between the historical material underpinnings of the apartheid legacy and correspondingly its ideological justification. History will impose judgment on us in terms of whether we uphold the laws of the land, fight scourges that rob the masses of our country to whose socio-political freedom Nelson Mandela had committed his life. This means showing intolerance to pathological conditions such as theft of public resources through corruption, abuse of political power, and a host of other underhand means that rob everyday people of the meaning of freedom. At another level, Mandela's uncompromising stance on the sanctity of our system of democracy, the primacy of the law, ethical orientation to governance, and generally carrying ourselves as models of propriety will continue to be a hard act to follow, but must nonetheless be followed to the letter. There can only be two ways about moving our nation forward. A nation that adheres to the dictates of conscience, the dictates that put human beings at the center of existence, or the regressive form of existence in which all that came before dissolves into nothingness. In a classical sense, we cannot have our cake and eat it. For most of his life, Nelson Mandela led and inspired millions to action so that all South Africans could have access to this very parliament in which we are sitting to pass just laws that govern the lives of our people. Honorable members, the meaning of Nelson Mandela's legacy speaks to the conditions of the African people on the rest of our beloved continent with the same force. Nelson Mandela represented progressive African nationalism that sought to give form and content to the aspirations of millions of poor African peasants, working class, and underclass that faced the enormity of social existence day by day. The brand of African nationalism he represented sought to reclaim the African center, to thrust the African to the pedestal of progress through self-reliance, through observing the principles that underpin modernity, and through setting about harvesting such principles for African progress. The task that faces our continent is to let ordinary Africans lead the historical process to define their destiny in social conditions ideal for progress. It should revolt the rest of our continent and offend our sense of common decency when the disproportionate number of humanity trapped in ignorance, poverty, squalor, and beggarly conditions and occupying ontologically precarious state remain African across generations. At the center of Mandela consciousness is the African claim to historical agency, a subjective will to recast social existence in terms that affirm our own development as a people with a great potential to contribute to the march of progress. If we as Africans across the length and breadth of our continent are inspired by Nelson Mandela's life at all, it means a conscious and continued effort to entrench ideals of democracy in the African soil so that democratic experience becomes second nature to the African mind. There is enough under the soil and on the soil of our continent to provide for the needs of all Africans. All it takes to build a monument to the Mandela experience is to prevent African children from sinking into the depths of hopelessness by empowering them with freedom, a culture of human rights, education, access to health, and space for their creative prowess to take full flight. Honorable members, I would argue that the same level of Mandela consciousness needs to infuse the global thought systems. I would argue that at this level, upholding Nelson Mandela's legacy should shake up those charged with the responsibility to assist with bettering life in the developing world. After scores of conferences over many years by august bodies of governance on the global level, we have to ask the question, why many across the globe continue to wallow in conditions of immiseration? After multinational companies have made stupendous profits from their commercial efforts on the African continent, a legitimate question arises as to why Africans remain sweated labor, pedestrians on matters of global commerce, and frozen outside the global business mainstream, when their continent bears countless minerals beneath its soil. This may be the moment to rethink our ways, as well as the nature of the challenges we face. It may well be so if humanity is to take Nelson Mandela's journey a step further. To consider Mandela's legacy on the global stage is to confront askew global power relations, the insidious insincerity that has numbed the sense of many men and women who command the type of power that can banish poverty from the midst of human life. Why then do the majority of the world's people, the great unwashed, live in abject poverty when a fair distribution of the world's resources would not even minimize the material comfort of those who wallow in luxury at the top of social articulation? I would submit that we cannot claim to follow in the footsteps of this inspiring leader when we have these shocking levels of poverty sitting cheek by jowl with fabulously dazzling material riches known to human history. Just as we are all united in a frenzy of the Mandela experience, we can, if men and women of vision issue forth, change these odious conditions that face the rest of the world to enable the emergence of a new human experience. Honorable members, in concluding, I wish to remind us of Milan Kundera's view that The struggle of humanity against power is the struggle of memory against forgetting. Our struggle is against forgetting, as well as the approach we need to embrace to ensure that neither our generation nor subsequent generations forget our noxious past, even as they work for social change. Going forward, the struggle of memory against forgetting entails not forgetting the need to change the political, social, and economic character and how we relate with each other. Indeed, forgetting about the lessons of history leads to repetition of history's errors. While Mandela's place in history, in historical memory is cemented, we should never forget the meaning of the life he lived, a life that set a standard. Notably, we should never forget that his life was about the people above anything else. Among the critical lessons we should draw from his life is that history is made by common people, of whom he was one. Never one for self-aggrandizement, he never attributed to his person any achievements, despite the catalytic role he always played. Another distinguished South African, Peter Abrahams, captured Nelson Mandela's life with uncanny precision when he contended that, and I quote, "You can't walk alone. Many have given the illusion, but none have really walked alone. Man is not made that way. Each man is bedded in his people, their history, their culture, and their values," close quote. Honorable Speaker, let me also express a word of gratitude to the Mandela family for having shared Nelson Mandela with South Africa, with Africa, and the rest of the world. We thank you for bearing the brunt of history with such fortitude, letting go of a loving husband, a doting father, a grandfather, and an uncle, which in turn negatively affected your family in ways irrevocable. For all this, we thank you. I thank you for, Honorable Speaker, I want to thank you for this honor to address the joint sitting of Parliament to pay tribute to a human being that represented all that is lovely in human existence. Hamba kahle Madiba, hamba kahle Dalibunga, goha lomzi wakamtihaha, delugufa lwaga ngube. It has been a life and such a life, and I thank you for your attention.
I thank the Honorable Deputy President. Before I invite the next speaker to the podium, I wish to recognize presence in the gallery of Reverend Paul Tutu, representative of Chapter 9 institutions and organizations of civil society, nonke namkelekile. And I wish to invite the Honorable, the Premier of the Western Cape to the podium.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy President, honorable colleagues, we are gathered here today to pay our respects to the most revered person of our age. We are humbled and proud that, like him, we can call ourselves South African. Today, our thoughts and prayers are with Madiba's immediate family here in the gallery with us today, and with his entire South African family, and with a global community that seeks to uphold the values he embodied. His death has united the world in grief. but it has also united us in hope. He showed us that service and sacrifice do indeed leave the world a better place, that human beings can leave the world a better place. More has been written about Madiba than of any other person this century, so what is there to add? The Honourable Deputy President spoke about our pain, and we all feel that pain. And it is truly remarkable to see that pain reverberating around the world like no other event could have, joining all of us together in experiencing it. But time will heal our pain. What must remain, and indeed what must grow within us, is a sense of the enormous responsibility we have inherited to continue his work. He has handed the baton to us, and we dare not drop it. I found the best summary of our responsibility in the words of Mrs. Coretta Scott King, the widow of Martin Luther King Jr., who, like Madiba, became a global icon in the same cause. Mrs. King said, "The struggle for freedom is never finally won. You earn it and you win it in every generation." Now, we know that if anybody earned freedom, it was Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, and indeed he earned it for all of us. But I was particularly struck by the word earn in that sentence, because we want to believe that freedom is a right. But in an era full of demands, it is helpful to hear the word earn again. And it reminds us to ask ourselves, how do we earn our freedom now? Madiba's most famous phrase was, "It's a long walk to freedom," which is also the title of his autobiography, which I think many of us have returned to in the last few days. The long walk to freedom is not yet done. The destination is not yet reached. It never is. Ahead of us still lies a long walk to the kind of freedom that each South African can use to improve their lives. Freedom you can use is freedom fulfilled. Today we must face the fact in this House that millions of South Africans have formal freedoms, but still cannot use them to improve their lives because they lack the education, the security, the health, and the means to do so. Our work in taking Madiba's legacy forward is to ensure that many more South Africans are able to use the freedoms that he bequeathed them, and that they appreciate, like him, the discipline and the diligence required to use your freedoms. Otherwise, we betray his legacy. Of the millions of words written and spoken about Madiba in the last few days, there are none more famous than the words he spoke from the dock during his treason trial. And we know them well. I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons will live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and see realized. But if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die. However profound and well-known that passage is, it is also important to dig a bit deeper. Just a few short sentences above those words in his most famous speech are these: "Political division based on color is entirely artificial. And when it disappears, so will the domination of one color group by another." The ANC has spent half a century fighting against racialism. When it triumphs, as it most certainly must, it will not change that policy. Profound words indeed. The best tribute we can pay Madiba now is to ensure that our political debate focuses on issues of how best we can ensure that each South African child, whatever the circumstances of their birth, inherits freedom they can use. Let his death open that new chapter. Lala ngoxolo tata. Asoze sikulibale.
Siyabulela, Madam Premier. The next speaker, my list, is the Honorable the Premier of the Northwest.
Mr. Speaker, Chairperson of the NCOP, honorable members, ladies and gentlemen, my respect to the Mandela and Sisulu families. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, our father, the Commander-in-Chief of Umkhonto weSizwe, the volunteer-in-chief, the first democratic president of South Africa, Saparangwe, the icon of the world, has gone to join his ancestors. Mr. Speaker, different constituencies in the Northwest have sent different messages. One which went to my heart was this one. Die groot Madiba slap. Ons is hartseer en bekommerd. Maar ons gaan hom sy rus. Ons hoop julle, die ANC, sal op sy spore bly om ons land veilig vir almal te hou. Mr. Speaker, the public servants of the Northwest also woke up on Friday morning and decided they were not going to work. They dared me to fire them. They said they were taking the day to honor the men who had made it possible for them to have their names and their jobs and their dignity. And of course, we could never fire them for honoring the men they called their father. They dared and challenged one another to stay true to the values and the leadership of this, their father. The mood in the Northwest, Mr. Speaker, is sad. It is not hopeless. We are not lost. We may be disappointed that perhaps Madiba went before we proved to ourselves and to him that the sacrifice he had made was not in vain. That the lives of South Africans are changing every day for the better. That those freedoms which my colleague is referring to, the social, the economic, the political freedoms, the promise of freedom, equality and unity, were actually being realized. Mr. Speaker, we are proud that this rare kind of being, this exceptional African, wise and warm, was our very own. We are proud that Madiba was the great but humble leader. He was not flawless, but he is the one leader who taught us in the African National Congress that courage is actually your ability to rise up and to strive for greater heights every time you stumble. We draw inspiration from this leader who continuously involved himself in the struggle of all our communities. He loved children. He protected the sick. He showed compassion to the poor. He believed in education and sought to ensure that education would be the weapon that we use to eradicate poverty and inequality in our country. He knew that without eradication of inequality and poverty, democracy would be a figment. He believed that traditional leaders needed to educate themselves so that they can better serve their people. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, Deputy President, the Northwest is resolute that it will reopen the Traditional Leaders Training College in the Northwest. In 2004 in Mumbai, President Nelson Mandela said, and I quote him, "We owe a huge debt to future generations in the form of a better world. It has to be a better world, one where the rights of every individual are respected, one that builds our aspirations for a good life, and one that enables every individual to optimally develop their potential." He was committed to equality and democracy. Despite repeated provocation, sometimes in this very house, he resisted answering racism with racism. He resisted answering hatred with hatred. And he taught us the very simple things. He taught us to respect time. He taught us to walk and to talk straight. He taught us to be good listeners. He remembers all of us, our little burdens, and no problem you had ever told to Madiba was ever too petty for him to remember and to try and help you resolve. He dedicated his legal practice to fighting injustice and apartheid, placing himself at the disposal of the poor and the helpless. Despite the 27 years of deprivation, he came out to lead the effort to build a united country. His resilience, his integrity during the difficult years in prison and through the negotiations process inspired us as the oppressed poor, the world throughout, to strive for unity, to strive for peace, to fight for our identities, and to fight to retain our cultures. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, Nelson left this world a better place. Perhaps our sadness stems from our uncertainty about our ability to emulate his confidence, his humility, his honesty, his determination, his strength, and his vision. We must honor this extraordinary being, the sage of our age, whose life represents the triumph of the human will, justice, equality, and progress. The big question is, are we ready as individuals and as a nation to follow in his footsteps? The answer from the Northwest is yes, and yes again, because our action will be motivated by the vision that drove his life, a life that was dedicated to giving and to transformation. Mr. Speaker, history will remember Rolihlahla as a champion for human dignity, for freedom, for peace, and for reconciliation. He was gentle with the poor and the children. He was very firm and uncompromising in upholding discipline and the mandate of the people. All of us will remember his magnificent and remarkable personality during the CODESA negotiations. We know in the African National Congress that without his leadership, things might have gone horribly wrong. And yet, this leader, this great man, never took personal glory. He taught us to consult. He taught us to respect collective leadership. We owe to him and to his comrades and to the people of this country to celebrate him in a manner that will multiply and replicate his courage, his humility, his intellect, and his willingness to sacrifice, his capacity to forgive, and his wisdom to acknowledge the humanity of others. Those of us who were privileged to become leaders in his time will remember his insistence of always putting the concerns of people first. His insistence of always understanding what the needs of the people were. Those of us who are women within this house will remember and look through and say, indeed, it was Tambo, it was Walter Sisulu, it was Mandela's legacy that first of all we got the 30% quota, and secondly that the benches of this house for the first time got numbers of women in, which have been increasing and increasing. It would be also members who started off in that 5 years with Nelson Mandela, who will remember what we used to call in the ANC Women's League the Malta Bella breakfast, where we would have to come in and justify why we were taking certain stances within this parliament on women. It will be remembered by the likes of Comrade Tony, Comrade Lindwe Sisulu, again the Malta Bella breakfast, on decisions and positions we adopted as we were negotiating around issues of security in this country. It will be those who served with us in the Sports and Recreation Committee who will remember how we had to fight to keep the positions. And in the end, we would only win if you could convince Madiba that it wasn't your personal like, that it wasn't for you, that whatever position you adopted and policy you advocated for was for the greater good of other people. We want to say thank you to this father of the nation. We want to rededicate ourselves in his name, that making ours a country that is decent, that is caring, that will always uphold the law, that will walk in the footsteps of Nelson Mandela, is non-negotiable. We want to salute the Commander-in-Chief. We want to salute the prisoner. We want to salute the boxer and the sportsman. But importantly, we want to salute the father of nations in South Africa and across the world. Rolihlahla.
I thank the honourable member. I now wish to invite the Honourable MGPT Likota to the podium.
Ntate motsamaiso wa mosebetsi, lefu ke ngwetsi ya malapa ohle, mme ha ka jeno e etetse lelapa lena ha re sana mantswe a mangata, se re tlo tla leboha tse etsahetseng. Modulasetulo ha re ke re hlahlobe tsela tse re di tsamaileng. Takalumumba, mphato a Tlhamela Zizi le Ramokgadi, molaodi wa Vuisile Mini le mabotho a lerumo la setjhaba, o re siile kajeno, o se a robetse le a nkutlwa na. Mohlankana ke le etsang mohlolo ya re a kgutla komeng a betlilwe a baleha ntho monate a thobela lenyalo. O se a re siile kajeno Madiba. Lefaufau le kileng la tlamelana le medimo ya apartheid, bo Verwoerd le bo Vorster. We shall meet force with force. Le latetse bo Mahabane, bo Xuma, bo Luthuli. Oui, Madiba. Lentswe le kileng la omanya morena Makgowa re le teng re mametse mala a kgwehla mangwe le a thothomela ra itshwarella ka dipilara e mongwe ba itshwarella ka lekgowa la leponisa le thotse ka jeno ma South Africa principal e kgolo ya sehlekehleke Robben Island teacher ya tshwete le moseneke e se kwetse sekolo seo e tshiletse mose o Jordan ke Madiba e moholo ke mohlankana ile nga tshila dinoka a ba tshila le lekwa a fitla ema Gauteng ha le ntse le mmametse le tle le utlwisa hore ke motswalle moholo wa motlotlei wa pele wa Basotho morena Moshweshwe ya kileng a re motse ho agwa morapedi o ka nketsang hae a hiletho le yena re ha shebane le rona re le ma South Africa a re hopotsa mantswe a morena moholo a re khotso ke kgaitsedi yaka mme ha khotso e le kgaitsedi yaka le tleke le inahanele le le setjhaba sa South Africa ba batsholo ba basweu mefuta yohle ba buang dipuo tse fapafapaneng le inahanele ha ke re khotso ke kgaitsedi yaka hore na khotso ke eng ho lona ke re wi Madiba o re si empa re khutsa. We must now face our future without this individual who was central to the issues directing our nation for a long time. But he's taught us well. He's left us example. We are ready. So we must take up the cudgels of struggle and soldier on. The task he gave us to search for a better life for all. Hala la Madiba. Hala la Rolihlahla. Tsela tshweu mohali wa setjhaba. May his soul rest in peace.
Thank you very much. Relebohile Latelikota. I now wish to invite the Honorable Buthelezi to the podium. Shenge, you have the floor, sir.
Honorable Speaker, Honorable Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, His Excellency the Deputy President, the Honorable the Acting Chief Justice, Mr. Justice Moseneke, Honorable Deputy Speaker, Honorable Deputy Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Honorable Premiers, members of the Mandela family and the Zulu family, Honorable Ministers, Honorable Deputy Ministers, fellow South Africans. It is with great awe that I stand here to say a few words after the passing away of a giant who was not only my leader in the ANC Youth League in the 50s, but later a senior leader of our movement. I feel as overawed, Mr. Speaker, as I did when I stood up at Groudville to deliver the funeral oration at the funeral of my leader and mentor, Inkosi Albert Luthuli, at the request of his family and the external mission of the ANC. Madiba was not only my leader, but proved to be a real friend to me in all kinds of political weather that the country has gone through. Today, a nation mourns, the world mourns. The passing of Nelson Mandela closes a chapter in history that will be remembered as a time of struggle, a time of freedom, and of great transformation. Yet this chapter was only the preface, pointing towards the story that is yet to come. As we continue to write the story of South Africa, let us be inspired by Mandela's legacy. Let us remember his passion for reconciliation, his capacity for forgiveness, and his bold leadership. Let us also remember his honesty, which is what I want to talk about in my few minutes. Mr. Mandela's old-style honesty was a value that my generation admired. I respected him for an admission he made in April 2002. He said, and I quote him verbatim, "We have used every ammunition to destroy Buthelezi, and we have failed. He is still there. He is a formidable survivor. We cannot ignore him," unquote. That admission, fellow South Africans, made many in the organization quite unhappy. But that was the kind of brutal frankness that positioned Mandela as a leader among his peers. Even as a head of state, his honesty drove him to make admissions that few others at the helm of a country would dare to make. On the 1st of June, standing on this podium, 1995, President Mandela spoke in this assembly about the Shell House massacre of the 28th March 1994, in which 8 civilians died when security at the ANC headquarters opened fire. In total, 60 lives were lost and 300 were injured. A year later, standing on this podium, in this assembly, Mr. Mandela said, and I quote him verbatim, according to the Hansard, he said, "I gave instructions to our security that if they attack the house, please, you must protect that house, even if you have to kill people," unquote. This admission that he himself had given that order distressed Mandela's comrades. And I can hear the murmurs which I expected. But 6 days later, he stood again in the National Assembly on this podium and reminded all of us, and I'm quoting verbatim, he said, "For reconciliation to have real meaning, the truth should be brought to light," unquote. As painful as it was for me to hear my president's honesty about Shell House enhanced my admiration at the same time for him, because he was a man of truth. Because some people regard lying as a trademark of us politicians. But he was not a petty politician like the rest of us. He was a great statesman. And I know that many still carry the wound of Shell House and the multitude of wounds inflicted by the People's War. I too carry scars in my heart, but there is a saying that has defined my life, and one that Madiba used to repeat as well. Quote, "The definition of a saint is a sinner who dies trying," unquote. There is no one more deserving of forgiveness than Nelson Mandela, and few who epitomize forgiveness more. Now that the Lord has called him home, I urge those who carry any wounds to forgive him. It is true, after all, that errare humanum est. In pouring all the accolades that he richly deserves, let us also remember that he was a fallible human being like all of us. After all, even Christ, the Son of God, refused to receive the accolade that he was good, and he said only God, his Father, could be called good. Following the rupture between the Inkatha and the ANC in 1979, I endured, Mr. Speaker, vilification and pain. But even at the height of the campaign to destroy me, Mr. Mandela himself showed integrity, a very rare attribute these days. In 1986, the Commonwealth Eminent Persons Group visited South Africa to assess the situation under apartheid and met with Mr. Mandela on Robben Island. His Excellency General Olusegun Obasanjo, the former head of state of Nigeria before that, later recounted to me that they asked Mandela who I was, because they were hearing so much about me. Mandela answered, quote, "Buthelezi is a freedom fighter in his own right."
Order, members, order.
Yes, this is an expression of rare honesty, as much as an expression of our friendship, which endured for as long as I knew him. He expressed his confidence in me time and again. We are all witnesses. As we served in a democratic government under him, appointing me as acting president in his absence. He was not obliged to do that. And that's why there are murmurings even now. Because he didn't like it, but he did it. That is the quality of the giant we're honoring today. My only regret as we prepare to inter the remains of our beloved Madiba is that his long pursued vision of reconciliation is not complete. He charged those who came after him to take up the cause of reconciliation, yet he enters eternity with this dream still unachieved. The dishonored agreement of 19 April 1984 signed by Mr. Mandela, Mr. de Klerk and myself still haunts our efforts.
Honourable Member, I regret to tell you that your time has expired, sir.
Sir, can I ask a favor? Can all the men stand up? Ah! Dalipunga!
I thank the Honourable Speaker. I now wish to invite the Honourable J.J. Maglua to the podium. Order, members, order.
Honourable Speaker, the 5th of December 2013 will be remembered for centuries to come, as this day the world stood still. It did so because a giant amongst us has fallen. Tata Madiba was more than just our beloved country's heart, he was our collective soul. For each and every one of us, he provided the hope that tomorrow will be better. And for each and every one of us, he was our beacon, a guiding light towards the good and just. He bound us together in all our diversity. He helped soothe the pain that so many of us suffered for centuries before him. For this, I will always be grateful. Thank you, Tata Madiba. Mr. Speaker, my daughter Agatha was born on 14 April 1994. She was only 13 days old on the day South Africa held its first democratic elections. She will be voting next year for the first time of her life. When comforting her, after paying her last respect for Madiba at the place of tribute, she wrote, "He did not even know us, but he worked to set us free. To an amazing man who set this world right, rest in peace, Nelson Mandela." As a father and as a public representative, I ask myself, what will I do to forward this legacy? The answer is in everything. Tata did it for us. He taught us that we must treat our children as our greatest commodity and do everything possible to provide them with the opportunities in life to succeed. That is why he was the champion of the Nelson Mandela's Children Fund, an icon whose Nobel Prize resulted in a gift for charity. He taught us that our future will be better and brighter if we work together hand in hand. We must never forget that reconciliation relies on you and me to make it work so that we can achieve a truly non-racial society. He taught us that we must respond to those who hate and wish to do wrong in our society with love and forgiveness. Indeed, Madiba understood everyone and represented the best in humankind. He saw human beings as human beings, created equally, and never judged people on the basis of the color of their skin. And despite all the fame and worldwide respect, power never made Madiba corrupt. Instead, after just one term, he stepped down as president. That is the role model that every one of us in this room should be proud of. While it is true that he is no longer with us today, his legacy lives on. And it's up to every South African to protect it, foster it, and make sure that every South African is able to experience the fruits of its efforts. Fellow members, let us celebrate his life and honor his global legacy in everything we do, everything we say. Every day should be a Madiba Day. I would like to end with my favorite quote from Tata as a reminder to every member in this house and every South African watching on TV today, that our work is not done and that we must now ensure we realize the vision that Mandela provided to us. I quote, "For to be free is not to be merely the cast of one's chain, but to live in the way what respects and enhances the freedom of others." Ambagatle to the son of the soil. Long live Nelson Mandela, long live Amandla.
I thank the honourable member, and I wish to invite the Honourable Wankwa to the podium. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, Honourable Deputy President, honourable members, distinguished guests, and fellow South Africans. From the outset, let me apologize for the absence of my president, Mr. Bantu Olomisa, in today's joint sitting. Mr. Olomisa was unable to make it due to being busy with the funeral arrangements of our late former president, Dr. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. Let me also take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to, on behalf of the United Democratic Movement, join the millions here at home and abroad in extending our heartfelt condolences to the family, the African National Congress, and friends of the former President of the Republic of South Africa, Dr. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. Our thoughts and prayers are with you during this time of grief. In fact, words seem inadequate to express how sorry we are for your loss. Fellow South Africans, we are gathered here today to undertake the sad duty of bidding farewell to an outstanding leader of the 20th century, the father of our nation, our struggle icon, and the first democratically elected president of the Republic of South Africa. Tata Madiba, as he was affectionately known, spent 27 years in prison, fighting gallantly in order to ensure that you and I can enjoy the freedom and democracy that he and some of the members of his generation did not enjoy. To Tata and his generation, no price was too high for the liberation of the peoples of Africa. This turned him into a repository for all the hopes and aspirations of our people, a duty he discharged with distinction. However, when Tata came out of prison, he displayed an amazingly high capacity for forgiveness, which at times brought a look of complete incredulity in the faces of those who believed that we did not have it in ourselves to transcend our divisive political past. Tata was, however, undeterred by this. He continued to epitomize the values of non-racialism, reconciliation, and service to the people. Under his sterling leadership, we demonstrated to the whole world that we too were more than capable of building a winning nation, united in our diversity. In the words of former President Thabo Mbeki, and I quote, "Madiba preeminently represented a generation of the titans that pulled us out of the abyss and placed us on a pedestal of hope on which we continue to rest," end quote. Mr. Speaker, Madiba was a man of integrity whose humanity and compassion inspires us greatly and will continue to inspire us and future generations for many years to come. John Maxwell's apt description of integrity in his book, The Four Pillars of Leadership, captures the essence of the values that Tata Madiba espoused during his lifetime when he says, and I quote, he says, "Integrity commits itself to character over personal gain. to people over things, to service over power, to principle over convenience, to the long view over the immediate. The outpouring of, end quote, the outpouring of grief after Tata's passing, the likes of which are rarely seen, bears testimony to this and also clearly demonstrates that he was not only thought of as just the father of our nation, but as one of the greatest leaders and outstanding heroes of the 20th century. Honorable members, one of Tata's facets of leadership which also deserves mention here today was his willingness to listen and learn from people from all walks of life. Growing up in the deep rural parts of the Eastern Cape during Tata's term and watching him in action, I was always inspired by his ability to listen to opposing views and his courage to admit when he was wrong. We should learn from these important values of tolerance and humility, as they will help us in our efforts to revive his and Bishop Tutu's vision of building a rainbow nation. Fellow South Africans, the passing of Tata, sad as it is, provides us yet another opportunity to reflect on the progress made and the distance we have come. It should remind us that our hard-won liberty is built on a contrasting tale of men at their most evil and most heroic. And well, like everything else in life, the good emerge victorious over the bad. This is one victory that we must never betray or squander. In this regard, the best present we can give to Tata Madiba is to preserve his legacy by espousing his values and ensuring that the torch of freedom and democracy for which he fought courageously continues to burn. In his eloquent words, we should ensure that, and I quote, "The sun never sets on so glorious a human achievement. Lala ngoxolo yemyem, nolomsila, sophicho, vela bembenzele, madibindonga, ugqatso lwakho lufezile. Dalbonga." Tabule.
I thank the honourable member. I now wish to invite the Honourable, the Deputy Minister of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries from the FF+, to the podium. You have the floor, sir.
Speaker, on behalf of the Freedom Front Plus, I wish to express my sympathy with former President Nelson Mandela's wife and his family being present here today. Wanneer as Christene glo ons volgens Psalm 147 om nie op prinses te vertrou nie, maar dat alle mag, ook die mag van leiers van God afkom. As oud-president Nelson Mandela vandag hier was, soos ek hom ken, sou waarskynlik beswaar gemaak het teen die wyse waarop van 'n ikoon en 'n bo-menslike wese gemaak word. Hy was baie gestel daarop om in gesprekke altyd daarop te wys dat hy deel van 'n span is en nie alleen opgetree het nie. With the above taken into consideration, no one can ever deny the impact of Mr. Mandela made on South Africa and on the world. The reaction following his death surely confirms this. When we were young, we all had dreams as to how we would change the world, and we would put our stamp on it. It is given to few persons to live out their dreams in their lifetime. Nelson Mandela succeeded in doing exactly this. Against big odds, he had realized the vision he had as a young man. Can one person make a difference in politics? In my youth, I was involved in many debates about this. My argument was that politics is too complicated, with too many variables for one person to make a real difference. Sir, I was wrong. One person at the right place, at the right time, and with the right approach can make a huge difference. I still believe in this today as far as my own career is concerned, but Mr. Mandela and Mr. Mandela and I disagreed about many issues, but he proved this statement to be true. He not only had an influence on South Africa, but on the whole world, as we see with the funeral at the moment. My eerste ontmoeting was in die 90er jare, toe president Mandela my genooi het vir 'n gespreksontbyt met hom alleen. Dit was sy werkswyse, soos jy sal weet. Na die ontbyt het hy uurlange gesprek was my opsomming dat vriendelikheid en nederigheid sy sterkste eienskappe is. Maar jy nie vir 'n oomblik ook sy klipharde wil om sy eie doelwitte te bereik moet betwyfel nie. Die sentimentele, sagte oupa beeld wat mense vir hom het, wat hom nie ken nie, is in hierdie opsig waarskynlik misleidend. Hoe beskryf 'n mens meneer Mandela? Mandela, die jong aktivis, wat die ANC-leier sê dat geweld alles wat oor is en toe in die tronk beland. Of die middeljarige Mandela, wat Afrikaans leer ten einde die Afrikaner te verstaan. Of die ouer wyser Mandela, wat ons by die onderhandelinge leer ken het. which two words would describe them best? And that's very difficult. I would say dignity in adversity. He also had the two essential qualities which are necessary for genuine statesmanship. But I call that rare combination of the idealistic on the one side and then the severely practical on the other side. A leader who acts merely to be popular isn't a real leader. A real leader must be prepared to act against the majority because he or she knows that they are wrong and he or she must provide leadership to them in doing so. And surely this is not always easy. I remember how Mr. Mandela addressed 40,000 people in a stadium and strictly reprimanded them because they did not sing the Afrikaans part of the anthem in the end. From the reaction from ordinary people following his passing away, it appears that his popularity largely lay in his humane approach on a personal level. So on a Sunday afternoon, there was a call from Mr. Mandela to my home. He didn't want to speak to me, but to my daughter. My daughter was chosen as the Duke student at the university, and a short report about this had appeared in the Sunday newspaper that morning. Mr. Mandela just phoned to congratulate her. I started by stating that it's given to few men to live out their dreams in their lifetime. Nelson Mandela succeeded in doing so. The question is, what were these dreams of Mr. Mandela? He most probably summed it up best in his address in court in 1964, that's been quoted here. And he said, I fought against white domination, I fought against black domination, I've cherished the idea of a democratic and free society in which all persons will live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It's an idea for which I hope to live, for and to see realized, but my Lord, if it needs to be, it's also an ideal which I'm prepared to die. And also the quote where he said, never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another. The question for all of us, following the passing away of Mr. Mandela, is to which extent has South Africa achieved these goals? It is not a day for politics today, but my observation is that we are busy repeating some of the mistakes in the past. This time maybe only in reverse. The test in all debates in the future should be whether these dreams of Mr. Mandela will become more or less for South Africa. Maybe we must all remember Edmund Burke's truth, that's also true for Mr. Mandela, that says, all that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. Meneer Mandela, mooi loop, meneer Mandela.
Thank the Honourable Member. And I wish to invite the Honourable Mishri.
Honourable Speaker, Honourable Deputy President.
All members, order. I know you are all happy to see Reverend Mishri back in Parliament, but please listen to him.
Thank you.
Proceed, Honourable Member.
The Mandela and Sisulu families and honourable members and esteemed guests. It was indeed an honor to serve as a member of Parliament under the leadership of former President Nelson Mandela when he became the first democratic president of the new South Africa in 1994. I concur with all the wonderful tributes and accolades that were given to him this afternoon. But I want to focus on some of his ideals and values. I hope and pray that South Africans, particularly political leaders, will not lose sight of. What stands out the most to me of those values was the capacity that he had to forgive. After he was released from prison with other political prisoners, many expected revenge, confrontation, and in some areas, a bloodbath. Because he was a great leader, he chose to negotiate a peaceful settlement with his former oppressors. As progress was made, one of the most prominent leaders of both the ANC and SACP, Chris Hani, was assassinated. Fear and uncertainty filled the air. This great man, who had a vision for a peaceful, prosperous, and united nation, stepped forward and called for calm, while some of his comrades were questioning the sincerity and commitment of the former apartheid government to a peaceful settlement. Violent confrontation was averted because of the intervention of this great man we are honoring today. Speaker, I sincerely believe that the capacity that Tata Mandela had to forgive was given to him by God Almighty in answer to the prayers of his people who wanted to see a peaceful settlement in the country. Let us not forget that when some people were talking about war in the country, war that was expected to break out even by members of the international community, churches in South Africa and other parts of the world were praying for peace. That is why the 1994 peaceful elections were called a miracle. But at the center of all this, when we were praying, was this man of peace called Nelson Mandela. That is why it is proper for us to say today, thank you, Lord, for giving us Madiba. To his critics, I must admit that on many occasions, Mr. Mandela correctly said that he was not a saint. He made mistakes, as we all make mistakes. I did not always agree with him, but that did not change the fact that he was a great man, a great unifier, a builder, a bridge builder that all South Africans should honor and pay their respects to and learn from. Tata Mandela had one distinct characteristic that separated him from all other presidents we have had so far. And this was his respect and special way of dealing with leaders of opposition parties in parliament. Whenever he hosted visiting heads of state and other important dignitaries, he would introduce us individually to his guests, mentioning us all each by name. On a number of occasions, he would call leaders of opposition parties in parliament to ask for their opinions. He would tell them, and he would tell us how much he valued our opinions and contributions. He had a unique way of making a person feel valuable and special. I will always appreciate his commitment to forgiveness, his compassion, his commitment to reconciliation, peace, and nation building. Many township people who did not like rugby because it was associated with an oppressive regime changed their attitudes the day they saw Madiba wearing the Springbok jersey on June 24th, 1995, when the Springboks played against the All Blacks. All Blacks coach Laurie Martins is reported to have said that, and I quote, "The entire stadium was electrified at the sight of South Africa's first black president, sporting a garment that was indelibly associated with the apartheid regime," close quote. Speaker, today many black people wear the Springbok jersey with pride because they saw their hero, Mr. Mandela, wearing it the day the Springboks became the 1995 rugby world champions. Mr. Mandela influenced us all in many ways. That is why it is befitting for all of us today to be grateful that we are blessed to have a leader of the stature of Mr. Mandela, who showed the world that it is possible to forgive, regardless of how you were humiliated. It is possible to forgive, regardless of how deep the pain is. It is possible to hold hands with your former oppressor and enemy, reconcile with him, and move forward in unity for the sake of the nation. The best way to honor his legacy as South Africans is to never lose these values that are even Bible-based: love, compassion, forgiveness, reconciliation, respect, unity, and nation building. He embraced them all. God bless, heal, and comfort the Mandela family. God bless South Africa. Thank you.
I thank Reverend Misha. I now invite Honorable Mfundisi to the podium.
Honorable Speaker, the Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, honorable members, and the Mandela and Sisulu families. If there had been the best of times and the worst of times in South Africa and the world, this is the worst of times, while the best was when he was around. If there is a period of incredulity, this is the period. Much as we know that death is the way of all flesh, we South Africans find it hard to believe that former President Mandela has been called to glory. Words cannot suffice to express the emptiness, dryness, sadness, and paralysis that has befallen the country, though we know it had to happen. We continue to twitch ourselves to find out if it is true. This is one man we believe deserves to have been immortalized, not only in thought, but also in flesh. Ubao Nelson Mandela was the darling of all young people and was able to relate to all people across the color spectrum, around the globe and back home across the political lines. He was a father to all. President Nelson Mandela had a plastic memory. He could remember events and names of people as if he lived with them daily. Having been introduced to him once at the election center in Pretoria, the two subsequent times we met thereafter, he would call me by name and ask how Kgosi Mangwetwe was doing. His humility belied his ruthlessness in him if he was pushed too far. No one can forget how he came down like a ton of bricks on the then President de Klerk at the first sitting of the Convention for Democratic South Africa, but he was prepared to continue negotiating with him and even to go on to work alongside with him in the government of national unity. It is the same Nelson Mandela who traversed the length and breadth of this country, persuading all leaders of all formations to rise up to the building of a new South Africa. Those who spurned him or who spurned his invitation never knew what hit them thereafter. On behalf of the United Christian Democratic Party, I salute this indefatigable intellectual who sought to inspire confidence, leadership, and political wisdom. It will not be out of step to compare President Nelson Mandela to his namesake, Horatio Nelson, who, when the British troops were under siege in the Battle of Trafalgar and the king sent a white flag for him to surrender, put his telescope on the blind eye and said, "I see no order," and coaxed his troops to keep on fighting. In similar fashion, when most people were on the verge of accepting apartheid as a fait accompli, Nelson Mandela said, "No, here it is. We are about to complete 20 years under black majority rule, and the heavens have not caved on us." He stood up and spoke up against domination. Let us take solace in what David the psalmist said in Psalm 30 when he said, "There will be sorrow in the evening, but joy in the morning." This is our evening, and as sure as the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, South Africa will be a land and a place of joy and happiness in future, thanks to Tatu Mandela. Our commiserations go to the family, abathembu bephelele bebonke, the government of the Republic of South Africa, his political fort, the African National Congress, and all who lived in his shadow. Lala ngoxolo, Mandela umde, dalibhunga.
Siyabulela mfundisi. The next speaker will be the Chief Whip of the NCOP, who will be speaking from a seat. She will speak where she's seated. Will you please raise your hand so that the cameras can pick you up? There she is. Can the cameras pick her up? Okay, proceed now.
Somlomo sekela mongameli nabaphathiswa malunga ezindlu zombini zeParlamente usapho lwakaMandela nolwakaSisulu naye wonke umuntu olapha. Namhlanje sizokukhumbula yaye sibhiyozela ubomi bentsika exhathise ngayo iAfrican National Congress kunye nabantu boMzantsi Afrika. Siyazi ukuba siseza kuqhagamshelana naye ngejelo lomoya ekunye nezinye inkokheli zomzabalazo wethu. Njengokhongoloze nabemi boMzantsi Afrika sizingca ngokuba ukhe wabelana nathi sonke ngobomi bakho. Sibulela ngakumbi nendlela olulwe ngayo idabi lokuphelisa ucalucalulo nomkhethe kwilizwe lethu. Njengo-Enoch waseBhayibhilweni, wena wahamba noThixo nangoku awufanga undulukile. Ingathi nguSimoni wakudala, yena wathi uyamndulula umkhonzi wakho enoxolo mnini into zonke ngokwelizwi lakho, ngokuba amehlo am ayibonile inkululeko yoMzantsi Afrika. Awanalanga kuphuma phezu kwentaba yeNebo njengoMoses, usifakile Kanani. Usebenze ngomzimba ongenamkhinqa, wathi isahlulo samandla akho wasipha uHelen Joseph, uRuth First, uLillian Gonyi nezinye inkokheli. Khange ube namona uyidumisile le nkonzo yakho yeAfrican National Congress. Ube yi-ankile yombutho wesizwe, wayinsika yomkhonto wesizwe. Usifundisile ukuba njengoko kubhaliwe, ze singabi nambutho wumbi ngaphandle kwe-African National Congress. Yona yasikhupha ematyotyombeni, yasifaka ezindlini. Wena wenza into enkulu eyokubuyisela isidima somuntu ontsundu. Wathi abo bebephelelwe sisidima, ingakumbi abacinezeli bethu, wababuyisela futhi wabafundisa ukuba singabantu sonke. So Picho, wena ubululanyelwe nenkohlakalo ye-Atlantic Ocean, nelanga laseDrakenstein alikutshisanga, imimoya yeKapa yakomeleza. Yiyo loo nto amakhosikazi eli lizwe lethu lihle kangaka athi phumla ngoxolo ukwenze konke. Abantwana bethu balufumana felefele unyango. Siyalingana kholu calucalulo ngokwasini. Imfundo iyafikeleleka kumntu wonke ngaphandle kocalucalulo. Yonke lento uyenze ungenamona, ungenanzondo, udumisa umbutho wethu. Abantu boMzantsi Afrika uMadiba uthi, yivani ezi ndaba. Sinalo ibali lobomi obungcono elilubungqina bokuba yi-ANC kuphela umkhululi wabantu kwidyoko yengcinezelo nobukhobo nobugcisa. Yi-African National Congress kuphela futhi enika ithemba lokuba nawe usahluphekileyo le mini yeza nakuwe. Njengoko kwezi nyanga zokugqibela ubuwedwa esiqovulelweni, mawakwamkele ngovuyo amaqabane akho, Oliver Tambo, Walter Sisulu, Joe Slovo, Albertina Sisulu, Lillian Ngoyi, nabanye endingabakhankanyanga. Nesebe lakho selabulungisayo ubulungu bakho kukhongolozi bangasentla. Isithaba sakho sikulindele ngaphesheya. Madibomde, wena Sithalande, intonga yakho yobugorha nomkhonto wakho ziyakuhlala kwezi zakhiwo zale palamente zibe ngumthombo wamandla nakwabanye oomongameli belixa elizayo le-African National Congress njengoko ingasayi kuze iphinde eli lizwe lethu liphathwe ngabanye abantu. Amandla. Thank you, Speaker.
I thank the Honorable Chief Whip of the NCOP, and now invite the Honorable J.J. Gunda to the podium.
Honorable
Order, members, order.
Honorable Speaker, Honorable Chair, Your Excellency, the Deputy President, and all protocol observed, the Mandela family and the Sisulu family. Honorable Speaker, indeed we must thank God for blessing us with such a great leader like Tata Madiba. South Africa and the world has lost a father, a leader, and indeed the greatest South African that ever lived. There's no doubt about it. We can't even argue about it. He was the best South African that ever lived. Our deepest condolences to the Mandela family and sincere gratitude for sharing Madiba with us. He has left an indelible mark on all of us. Honorable Speaker, let me start this tribute with the words of the great man himself when he said, and I quote, "What counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived. It is what difference we have made to the lives of others that will determine the significance of the life we lead." Close quote. Honorable Speaker, again he said, when a man has done what he considers to be his duty to his people and his country, he can rest in peace. I believe I have made that effort, and that is therefore why I will sleep for eternity. Close quote. Madiba himself. Tata Madiba understood the power of forgiveness, because it is through forgiveness and reconciliation that we could unite and lead, that he could unite and lead this diverse nation. All of us that sit in this house today, we've got peace in our heart because of Madiba. He taught each and everyone that sits here today, you are not a better person than the next person. We need each other. That's Madiba. Ordinary people, he makes them feel great. When you get into his presence, he will make you feel that you are his leader. That's the leader that we had in South Africa. Someone that was respectful, someone that was respected. It's the first time in my life that someone can be put in prison for 27 years. When he comes out, he said, let's reconcile and forgive. That's a gift of God. It's not humanity. That's a gift from above. Honorable Speaker, let me close by saying this. It amazes me that a man of such humble beginnings could change so many people's lives only through forgiveness. We will miss him surely, but we will remember you in our daily lives, because this nation owes you to strive for a better life for all South Africans, not certain South Africans, for all South Africans. Lala ngokolo tata, I thank you.
Thank the Honourable Speaker. Honourable Bula, you have the floor.
Mr. Speaker, Deputy President, and members of the Mandela and Sisulu family, there are many sorrows in life, and one of the greatest sorrows that South Africans and the international citizenry would not like to endure is the sorrow of Madiba's passing away. As we continue to experience emotional pain and sorrow, the MF is deeply saddened, particularly because of the close and long Madiba-Rajbansi friendship. When I met Madiba, I was humbled by his spirit of humility. When he said, "I have come to personally thank Amichan," as he called the tiger, for his contribution to South African politics. It is an undisputed fact that Madiba's honor was derived from fighting for his people and putting his country first. On behalf of the MF, I convey heartfelt condolences and messages of strength, courage, and fortitude to the Madiba family and friends. I further, in the presence of the Madiba family here today, want to acknowledge all that Madiba did for each and every one of us here in so many different ways, unfailingly and uncompromisingly. Mr. Deputy President, your elevation under the guiding light of Madiba's teachings, and therefore your emulation, is an honor in its merit on its own. You bring comfort and confidence to the nation in this time of bereavement. Our sincerest sympathy also goes out to the ANC for the loss of a world icon, irreplaceable, impeccable, remarkable leader and father of our democracy. India's and South Africa's relationship was cemented by the uniqueness of Madiba's and Gandhiji's caliber. Madiba's in-depth knowledge, indescribable determination, and immeasurable sacrifice delivered us all from the horrific apartheid regime. His preparedness, even after 27 years of incarceration, after a renowned leader like Chris Hani's murder, President Mandela was the man that diffused a potentially explosive situation in the country. The fearless, courageous anti-apartheid activists and freedom fighters said, South Africa must recall the terrible past so that we can deal with it. Forgive when forgiveness is necessary, but never forget. As the Zulu proverb so accurately says, Umuntu, Umuntu, Ngabantu, meaning we are who we are because of other people. And this parliament in its current form, yes indeed, has come about precisely as a result of the 27 years in Robben Island. From humble beginnings, a prisoner, then elevated to the highest office of the land after a decade of white minority rule, and subsequently revered as the architect of peace and reconciliation. He touched the hearts of millions, black and white, with his warm and caring personality, especially the children and the youth, ensuring peace and justice for all. To Madiba's family, we express sincere gratitude for giving us Tata, who made an unbelievably incredible sacrifice for the freedom of our country and the suffering of the broad grassroots masses. To Tata Madiba, you ran a good fight. You fought a good fight. Yes, indeed, you leave behind a legacy infused with honesty, integrity, dignity, and above all, tenacity. The Lord has blessed few people to walk the path of sufferings on this earth, and Madiba was one of the chosen ones that changed those sufferings into the freedom that we all so profoundly enjoy today. Also echoing the sentiments, never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another and suffer the indignity of being the skunk of the world. Agaya kofana nawe Tata Madiba. Lalango tolo. May peace be upon Tata Madiba. and through the grace of God Almighty, may his soul rest in peace in the high heavens. Long live the spirit of Tata Matiba. Long live the spirit of Rolihlahla Mandela. Long live the spirit of Tata Mandela, Rolihlahla, the only one and only father of democracy. Long live!
I thank the Honorable Bula. I'll now invite the Honorable M. Zulu to the podium.
Mhlonishwa usomlomo omkhandlu wesishayamthetho sikazwelonke, umhlonishwa ubaba Mahlangu umkhandlu weyifundazwe, ondunankulu beyifundazwe bakhona phakathi kwethu, abaholi bamaqembu aphikisayo eParliament likazwelonke. Ngithi sihlangene lapha namhlanje sizobhonga emswanini ngokwedlula emhlabeni kweqhawe ubaba wesizwe uDokotela uNelson Mandela. Mina njengomuntu okholelwe edlozini ngikholelwe ukuthi imali ithi kusinethanethe ekseni namhlanje kabukeka ukuthi uTat Mandela bebusekile ukuthi abe khona phakathi kwethu. Noma benguqonda kahle ukuthi emndenini wakwaMandela inhlungu zingakanani ngoba ukuhamba emhlabeni komuntu akulula kuyakhaleka. Ngabakhalela umama baba kaMandela, ngikhalela inkosi yesizwe sakwaMandela emvezo uMandla Mandela ngoyisemkhulu wayo ebebemthanda. Njengathi njengezwe sisonke sibhubhile safa olwembiza ngokuhamba kwaleli qhawe. Inkulungwane zabantu emhlabeni zohlala zimkhumbula ubaba Mandela emsebenzini yakhe ayenzela izwe laseNingizimu Afrika. Akhona oyedwa la endlini owayengagqunywa ejele iminyaka ewu27 abuye awulala embhedeni owodwa nalowo muntu abemgqume iminyaka ewu27 ejele ngoba kwakuyisitha sakhe sangoqobo. Ngithi ke ngibonga abantu abadala lapha endlini abamqonda kahle engembala umntwana wenkosi nobaba umlangeni ukuthi bona abamqonda kahle ukuthi indlela yakhe yayiqonde kuphi ekwenzeni izinto. Ngibe ngithi lapha kwelika baba mkhulu selibhubhe abantu baka baba mkhulu ubusuku nemini. Ngiyakhumbula ngesikhathi kade phuma nje ejele ngomhla ka25 kuNhlolanja lapha afika khona kwenye inkundla zemidlalo eThekwini kuleli ngonyama wafika washo khona ukuthi ma unesibhamu sakho unomkhonto wakho unakho konke okungahle kugila imkhuba kufanele ukuhambe ukulahla olwandle. Ngibonge futhi mageba ukuthi uyakuveza ukuthi uMandela bokumholi wakho ubaba Mandela. Nanje ngomuntu omdala kuwe kufanele bemholi wakho. Nanje ukuthi washo elapha esigodlweni ekhaya kwakhe ngalamankenkani wathi noma ngathiwa niphambene kangakanani kodwa maye sekubizene senihlezi phansi uyakwazi ukuthi umbone. Ngibonge ukuthi ngomhla kaNcwaba zi13 ku1993 wahamba okufakazela ukuthi udlame ulwenyanya kangakanani lapha endaweni yaseThokoza futhi isizwe lapha sasibhubha khona. Ngingeke ngikwazi ukusho ukuthi umuntu oyedwa engakwazi ukwenza umehluko ekwazi ukukhuluma nabanye abantu ukuthi mabayeke imhlolo. Ngithi mhlonishwa mengameli phindika mengameli wezwe kusemzandleni zenu ukuthi ubaba uMandela lapha walala khona ukuthi iphupho lakhe lokuxolelana nokubuyisana kufanele lifeze ngoba ngeze saphambana ngesidingo sokuthi nje siphambene ngombono ukuthi leli goli solishaya kanjani kofuneka ukuthi sibe izitha zanguna phakade. Kodwa kusemahlombeni ukuthi nimele amaqiniso ukuthi konke nicabanga ukuthi kungenzeka kufanele kwenzeke. Ngibonge futhi inhloko yombuso obandlulu uDe Klerk wayemkuyole endlu emi kukhona lapha engimkhona mina umuntu kwaPhuwana Zulu esho ethi ubakhulula bonke uvula zonke inhlangano zombusazwe imlomo nabo bonke abasekudingisweni babebuye ekhaya ebese ncoma ethi wena wesilo wenza umehluko ukuthi ukwazi ukumeluleka ukuze aphume nalelo qhinga ngoba vele ukwelulekwa ikhona ukwazi ukuthi uhambe indlela eqondileyo. Ngithi emndenini wakwaMandela bakithi anibhubhanga nodwa sibhubhe sonke njengesizwe egameni labantu bakababa mkhulu ngiyakhala ngiyababaza ngithi ulale kahle Madiba uhambe kahle ngikhalela isizwe sabathembu bese ngikhalela inhloko yezwe nephini lalo nabo bonke abesenhlanganweni eholwa uTat Mandela. Ngiyabonga mfana.
Thank you. The next speaker is from Azapu and Honorable KG Dikobo. You have the floor, sir.
Honorable Speaker, Honorable Chairperson of the NCOP, Your Excellency Deputy President Motlanthe, the family of President Mandela, honorable members, honorable guests, the nation in mourning. I could not find an expression apt enough to explain the passing on of former President Mandela than the Sepedi saying, Mokgapa o mogolo o wele, dithara di lla mashogoshoro. The big tree has fallen, and birds that used to nest there are left stranded. We all knew that President Mandela had been sick for some time, and yet that was not enough to prepare us for the eventuality. We were a nation in denial, and somehow hoped against hope that the dreaded day would never arrive. Rolihlahla Nelson Mandela, first president of a democratic South Africa, he really deserved to be referred to as the father of the nation. Papa go setšhaba, Baba wa Taifa in Kiswahili. It is a title he carried with humility and dignity, and in the process earned South Africa the respect of the global community. President Mandela was a unifier. He tirelessly worked for the unity of the people of our land. He stretched out a hand of friendship even to those who had persecuted him. He would have been excused if he had come out of prison an angry and bitter person. In fact, there was a lot of anxiety from some who had believed that the country would descend into chaos. But he chose a very difficult path, the path of unity, love, and reconciliation. It is easy to hate, but it requires a brave person to love. The writer, Dr. John Maxwell, in his book, 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, one of those laws is the law of connection. And Maxwell summarizes this law by saying, a leader touches the heart before asking for the hand. Or, people do not care how much you know until they know how much you care. Madiba loved South Africa and her people. He had a caring attitude. That is why it was easy, even to those who might have differed with him, to respond positively when he reached out to them. He had touched the people's hearts, and they happily and confidently responded when he asked for the hand. Madiba earned the respect of the whole world, as I've said. But how can we, as a people, pay tribute to Madiba? We can do that by erecting statues in his memory. We can accelerate the building of the Nelson Mandela Children's Hospital. We can name schools and boulevards after him. But the greatest monument we can build in his honor is a free and prosperous South Africa. A South Africa free from poverty and want. A truly equal society where women and children can walk the streets without fear of abuse and crime. A South Africa free of corruption. On behalf of Azapu, I convey condolences to the family, to the Abatembu, to the African National Congress, and the people of South Africa. He has fought a good fight, and he has finished the race. We say a good fight, not a perfect fight. So we say, Robala ka khotso Madiba, lala ngoxolo Dalibunga, lala salama Baba wa Taifa. Ngiyathokoza, ngiyaleboga. Thank you.
I thank the Honorable Speaker. I now wish to invite the Honorable Godi from the APC.
Mr. Speaker, sir, comrades and honorable members, on behalf of the APC and indeed on my own behalf, I wish to convey our heartfelt condolences and solidarity with the Mandela family and the ANC on the passing away of our former president, Rolihlahla Nelson Mandela. May his soul rest in peace. He has served his country, Africa, and humanity with a distinction equaled by a few. As we mourn and celebrate Mandela's passing on and legacy, let us remember that he is a product of our past of oppression, of struggle, of victory. It is understanding this past with its pain, tribulations, loneliness, frustrations, tears, death, that will help us appreciate Mandela and those of his generation who served, suffered, and sacrificed for us to be here today. He stands head and shoulder above his generation. He is an expression of the best from that generation. On his life, we celebrate freedom. On his life, we honor service. Selfless service in the interest of all, the majority poor in particular. The struggle of which Mandela was a leader, a struggle for which he was prepared to sacrifice his life, was about restoring the dignity of the African people, changing their material conditions for the better. For as Amilcar Cabral said, when people fight for freedom, they are not fighting for ideas or things in anyone's head, but they fight for material benefits and to see their lives move forward. The sacrifices that Mandela made will be in vain if we continue to wax lyrically about him, and yet the majority of our people continue to wallow in gut-wrenching poverty, either because those of us given the responsibility to run the affairs of state at whatever level fail our people through inefficiency, waste, corruption, theft of public resources, and maladministration, or because those of us for whom conditions were created under white minority rule to acquire land, farms, factories, mines, and better education resist transformation and redistribution of the wealth of this country. President Mandela left us on the 5th of December, 2013. Yes, the 5th of December. It is a date that has been reinforced in our consciousness, for it is the birth date of one patriot, an outstanding leader of our struggle, Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe. Sobukwe was born on the 5th December 1924 in the little Karoo town of Graaff-Reinet. Long live Madiba, long live.
I thank the honourable member, and I wish to invite Honourable Bloom from Cope.
Honourable Speaker and Chairperson, let's first thank God for giving us this great leader. Yes, we must be thankful that God has borrowed us this great leader for 95 years, Comrade President Nelson Mandela. Speaker, I can say without any doubt that it was it not for Nelson Mandela, this country could have gone up in flames. It is because of Nelson Mandela's wisdom that we sit here in Parliament as fellow South Africans, black and white. Nelson Mandela saved this country from a bad blood. Yes, who can forget when one of our outstanding great leaders, Comrade Chris Hani, were brutally killed by evil forces? Yes, it was Nelson Mandela who said to us, the solution to the problems of our country won't come through the barrel of a gun, but through talking to each other. Yes, Nelson Mandela come all of us. Some of us were very hot-headed, who wanted to fight and avenge the killing of Comrade Chris Hani. We were very angry. Was it not for Nelson Mandela, thousands could have been killed, black and white. Yes, here we sit together as one nation because of him. Fellow South Africans, what is it that we can do to preserve his legacy? I believe Comrade Mandela left us with a precious treasure that nobody can take away from us. That is our Constitution. That is what Nelson Mandela lived for and struggled for. Let me remind you, this constitution was signed by this great hero, Nelson Mandela. If we respect this constitution like he did, we will always live in peace and harmony in this country. Yes, when thousands of us were locked up in the prisons of this country, our hope was pinned on our leaders on the island, led by Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. Yet we knew that he was also behind bars and serving a life term. But we were always singing a song, Rolihlahla Mandela, freedom is in your hands. Show us the way to freedom in our land of Africa. I want to ask permission for one verse. Rolihlahla, Rolihlahla, freedom is in your hand. Freedom is in. Show us the way to freedom. Show us the way in our land, South Africa. Mandela, 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 say freedom now.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. That's a beautiful song. Please take your seat. Honourable Member, please take your seat now. Honourable Member, please return to your seat.
On behalf of the Congress of the People and the Bloom family, we say to Madiba, Rolihlahla Ntate, Moy Luop Groot Leyer, till we meet again. Grandfather, we salute you, our Commander-in-Chief.
We thank the Honourable Member. Order. The next speaker on my list, Honourable Members, order. The next speaker on my list is Honourable S.A. Mpeti from the PAC. You have the floor, sir.
Speaker.
Order on members.
Chairperson of NCOP, Matatamu Presidente, Honorable members, La Parlamentele La Bawera, Kere Magume, Ushoko, Mandela. This special sitting of Parliament is a befitting tribute to Madiba as bid farewell to him. He comes from a different generation, a generation well drilled in selflessness and high moral values, a generation which produced Lembete, Mda, Sobukwe, Makwetu, and many others. Comrade Mandela has submitted to the will of God that after serving one's purpose, one must proceed to his kingdom. His body will join the earth, the land that his predecessors committed to fight for. He served, he sacrificed his purpose well, and is now enjoying a well-deserved rest. It is indeed highly significant. He died on the 5th of December, the day that Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe was born, another icon and a great leader in South Africa, in Africa, and in the world. Our thoughts are with his wife, May Gracia Machel, his former wife, May Winnie Madikizela Mandela, his children, his grandchildren, and the entire Madiba clan. Our thoughts are with his comrades who are here today, and those who passed on, that fought alongside with him to achieve a political democracy. Our thoughts are with the masses, our people in the whole country, the people throughout the world who embraced him as their own. The country has lost one of a great son in Tata. He departs in this world with a lot of work still needs to be done. You left us at a critical time with many challenges. The unemployment rate is still at a higher level. Poverty is still the same in the African people. African people are still landless. The moral values of this society has gone down, with the abuse of children and women very high. Self-accumulation of greed has reached unacceptable levels. These are trying times indeed. Speaker, let us use this time to reflect on the task at hand. We cannot delay the redistribution of land to the African people anymore. There cannot be any excuses. We urgently need to include the values we want to project. Stealing from the public purse has to be classified as treason and punishable by the life sentence. Ntate Mandela was in prison as a political prisoner, and it is unfortunate that we still have 18 political prisoners of APLA who are still in jail. We can call upon our presidency to release those comrades in honor of Ntate Mandela. Comrade Mandela was a great boxer, and today we are also mourning the death of great boxer Baby Jake Matlala. May his soul rest in peace. And many people who will be laid to rest this coming weekend, may Almighty God accept their souls. Many people passed on as from Thursday. This shows that Ntate Mandela is a king. So if you die, you don't die alone if you are a king. I thank you.
I thank the honourable member. I now wish to invite the honourable the leader of the opposition to the podium.
Mr. Speaker, Honourable Deputy President, honourable members, fellow South Africans. President Nelson Mandela, Utata Madiba, the father of our young nation, has passed on. Last week Friday, when South Africa awoke to the news of his departure, we felt the world stand still in solidarity with us. Yet no one is feeling the loss as deeply as South Africans are. It is a loss with which we are grappling as we would the death of a beloved parent. We all know that the last year was very difficult for President Mandela. For all 84 days in winter, during which he was hospitalized this year, we held our breath and wondered how we would continue without him. We prayed, we meditated, we stood vigil outside his home and his hospital ward, and we laid flowers to honor the great man who led the founding of a great nation. I cannot help but think that this was Madiba's way of giving us time, letting us know in advance, in his generous way, that we must begin to prepare ourselves for his departure. Because of his generosity, we are able both to grieve his loss and to celebrate his life today, his leadership, and the tireless work he did to build our nation. In the early hours of Friday morning, images of South Africans dancing and singing in celebration were beamed around the world. The sound of vuvuzelas pierced the early morning air from Mamelodi to Houghton and all the way to South Africa House in London. Today, we are grateful that he is no longer suffering or in pain. Utata has gone home. He is finally at peace. Useyidlozi lethu elihle. President Mandela may have died, but his legacy lives on in each and every one of us. He has transcended his own body of bones and flesh, and today his name is a symbol of all we hope for South Africa. Unlike the vast majority of the honorable members in this House today, I never had the privilege of meeting President Mandela. I was still a teenager when, flanked by the Honorable Albertina Sisulu, the Honorable Thabo Mbeki, the Honorable Trevor Manuel, and the Honorable Kada Asmal, he was sworn in as a Member of Parliament and then elected by this House as the first President of a democratic South Africa. But I do have one small memory of Madiba, which I may call my own. On Sunday, the 25th of February 1990, when I was 9 years old, my family traveled from Umlazi to Virginia Airport in Durban North to see Madiba's plane landing ahead of his King's Park address to the people of KwaZulu-Natal. That was the morning he would deliver this famous injunction to the people of a province torn apart by political strife. My message to those of you involved in this battle of brother against brother is take your guns, your knives, and your pangas and throw them into the sea. I remember watching Nelson Mandela disembark from a small aircraft, stooping as he exited the plane, and walk towards the airport building. Only a handful of journalists were there, and there were virtually no other members of the public. Although I was very young, I knew that I was standing in the middle of a page in history, watching it being written before my very eyes. As he walked over from the tarmac, Nelson Mandela looked straight at our small family and raised his fist in the air. And then an extraordinary thing happened. I watched my father respond by raising his own fist in the air. That small act was the first time I saw my own father express himself politically and in public. And because of the violent political strife in my home province, he was never able to live to see the dawn of democracy or to cast his vote in a free election. Because of that, that moment remains indelibly etched in my memory and on my heart. Mr. Speaker, I am from a generation which bore witness to South Africa's transition from oppression to freedom, but was not old enough to participate in it. We knew President Mandela from the countless images of him on television and in the media, from his speeches to which we listened on the radio, from archived footage which told the story of a fearless intellectual, a leader, and a visionary. For us, Madiba is truly an icon, a powerful symbol of all that is best about South Africa. Most importantly, Mr. Speaker, we are the grateful beneficiaries of all that President Mandela stood for. The challenge for young South Africans now is to work to protect and build on Mandela's vision for a non-racial society. His compassion for the poor and the weak is now our responsibility. His devotion to the children of our country is now our exemplar. And as the foremost beneficiaries of his life's work, we have a duty to take President Mandela's vision and make it a reality across South Africa. The American poet Maya Angelou has written a tribute to Madiba and to South Africa, which best encapsulates the weight of responsibility which now rests upon our shoulders. She says, "Yes, Mandela's day is done. Yet we, his inheritors, will open the gates wider for reconciliation, and we will respond generously to the cries of blacks and whites, Asians, Hispanics, the poor who live piteously on the floor of our planet. He has offered us understanding. We will not withhold forgiveness, even from those who do not ask. Nelson Mandela's day is done." In the coming weeks, much will be said about which Mandela we must remember. Who is the Mandela we must love? Which Mandela should we cherish? Is it Mandela, the fierce intellectual, entrepreneur, and partner in South Africa's first black law firm? Is it the Gandhian Mandela, who advocated the pacifist action of boycotts and strikes against the apartheid regime? Is it Madiba the prince, Mandela the athlete, or Mandela the young lion who took his party in a radical direction when he co-founded Umkhonto weSizwe? Or is it President Mandela the statesman who commanded the world stage with an unquestioned sense of morality and a keen understanding of the power of symbols and how they can draw together a divided people? I draw inspiration from the Mandela who stirred up his organization from within, who when he was my age became leader of the ANC Youth League and took his place on the ANC's national executive. The Mandela who pressed his colleagues for more drastic action and challenged the status quo. That is my Mandela, my inspiration. I say to my fellow South Africans, look to your Mandela at this difficult time. Cherish the memory of the Mandela you hold dear, who spoke to your heart and to your mind. Never let him go. Mr. Speaker, in the coming weeks, South Africans across our country will mourn, commemorate, and celebrate Mandela. We may have lost the father of our nation, but we must hold in our hearts the Mandela family, which has lost a father, a grandfather, and a great-grandfather. To Mrs. Graça Machel and to the Honorable Winnie Madikizela Mandela, I extend the deepest sympathies of the Democratic Alliance. To the Mandela children and grandchildren, thank you for your generosity. Thank you for sharing your father with our nation and with the world. South Africa has lost a founding father, but you have lost so much more than that. We cannot imagine your pain and your loss. Our hearts are with you. Honorable Speaker, we have lost the father of our nation at the tender age of 19 years old. Like every child who loses a parent at a young age, this means that we must grow up faster than we expected. We must take up the responsibilities with which we have been left behind. We must take courage and show leadership. We must take up the cause of our most vulnerable fellow citizens and realize the vision that Madiba had for us. Lala ngoxolo Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. Kumndeni wakho sithi akwehlanga lungehlanga. Lalani ngenxeba nina bakwa Mandela. Long live Nelson Mandela, long live.
I thank the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition, and I wish to invite the Honourable the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development. Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Chair of the NCOP, Deputy President, Honourable Members, the Mandela and Sisulu family. I beg the indulgence of all South Africans and the world to break with convention because today is a tribute to no ordinary man. I do so not because of my disrespect, but because I've been asked to pay tribute to one of the greatest sons to grace the length and breadth of our beloved country, continent, and indeed the world. All the contributions to the special sitting have spoken with unanimity because the man we are paying tribute to was well loved and respected across the aisles of this august house. Allow me to start where I should end. Dalepunga. Madiba sompicho yem yem. Allow me also to speak directly to our icon as if he was present among us. I'm doing so because for a life he so well lived and the dedication he put to a cause in the service of his people. I'm addressing him directly, Mr. Speaker, because although he has passed on, his spirit moves in this house. Tata Madiba, when the sad news of your passing on was received on the 5th of December, many thought the sun would not rise the following day. It did rise, but there was a strong absence of a ray. The nation should indeed be in mourning, but the need to celebrate your life surpasses our tears. We need to reflect deeply and safeguard all those institutions which you bestowed on us. One of these institutions is our Constitution, which we are all obliged to safeguard. There's no other better way to thank you as parliamentarians than to ensure that this Constitution you assisted to craft will always reign supreme. In 1934, at the age of 16 years, when you returned from the initiation school at Mvezo, the elders gave you the name Dalipung. To be given such a unique name at that age was an indication that we were born to lead. Whether you knew that one day, as 190 lawmakers would be so gathered in solemn respect to wish you well in your next journey, is a forethought, even though we cannot even answer. For many of us, it was neither envisaged nor forethought, even though we knew it was inevitable. I remember with fond memories when you visited my constituency on the 27th April 1994. We had come to report back to the first president of the ANC, Reverend Rolihlahla Dube, that the people of South Africa had last attained universal suffrage. As a symbol of respect, you cast your vote at Rolihlahla High School in Inanda, a school established by Dube. I had the honor to accompany you when you cast that first vote as a free South African. I'm today speaking of you as a man who could have chosen to lead a life of comfort and wealth, of glory and fame, but chose to lead his people. I'm speaking of you who could have chosen to challenge the laws of the country in high courts and win, but chose to live a life of prison, all because of the love you had for your people. When your friends Walter Sisulu and Oliver Tambo, you forged one of the best fighting triumvirates against the system of apartheid. The three of you became the architects of our new democratic order. Some of us who were called to serve in your cabinet approached the responsibility with fear and trepidation. You comforted us all by stating that we were equal to the task because you too had never been the president before. We took our cue from you and did the best we could in spite of our inexperience. It was an honor to serve in the first cabinet. At your pleasure, Mr. President Trevor. You taught us a true meaning of forgiveness. You help us to reclaim our dignity as a people and embolden us to stand with our shoulders high and our chins up. Your power to forge unity through sports across all codes reduced all anxieties and the fear for the future. Captured in Invictus, your power to use rugby to heal our nation would be kept for posterity to assist our children forge even tighter unity. Bidding you farewell as a gallant soldier, commander-in-chief, and leader of this revolution is to send you to meet those leaders of the ANC who went before you, Dube, Lembete, Tambo, Luthuli, Joslovo, Mapita, Krisani, and many, many more. You have joined the leadership corps that never bent when they were persecuted, a leadership that faced grinding indignity of the humiliation of the system of apartheid and came out on the other side with their heads held high. It was a leadership that never bent with the wind. You are also joining your favorite isiXhosa poet, S.E.K. Mkai, whom you refer to as our Shakespeare, our laureate, and the comet streaking through the night sky. I remember vividly that at your welcome home rally in Durban, you called on South Africans to throw their weapons into the ocean, a decision which was not popular in KwaZulu-Natal. It was only later that we realized the wisdom of your call, for continuing with internecine violence would have led to a mutually assured destruction, making the attainment of peace even more difficult. You have taught us the true value of humility. Your leadership has been one that was underpinned by honesty. You were courageous and led our country with dignity. You were compassionate and generous. You warned against the devastation of war and preached peace in some of the intractable conflict zones, such as Burundi. You brought us back into the family of nations. Having been isolated because of the policies of our past, the presence of world leaders tomorrow and Sunday will bear testament to the manner in which you helped us find our place in the community of nations. Indeed, when you stated on the 10th of May 1994 that never, never, never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another and suffer the indignity of being the skunk of the world, you were ushering us into an equal footing with the nations of this world. So when I pay tribute to you today, I'm moved by the spirit of respect that has been accorded to you from the different time zones. It is zones that are earlier times than ours, such as time zones of our friends and comrades in New Zealand and the East Pacific. I'm talking about those in the different climates who lived in the sunny parts of Europe and the colder climates of the Antarctic. I'm speaking about the many tributes that have poured from the Americas and from our African brothers and sisters. Your life touched all of them and restored faith in the triumph of the human spirit. I'm talking about the kaleidoscope of the colors of the people of the world who inhabit the antipodes, the transatlantic, the equator, and the Amazon forest. I'm talking about the people of different political and ideological persuasions and religious convictions. All of these look up to you as their own icon. You could have chosen the relative comfort of the life of royalty, but you chose the uncomfortable path of taking up the cause of your people's freedom. You were ready to die for the cause that you took and had to suffer the indignity of 27 years of incarceration. But you taught us more than just sacrifice. You taught us the true meaning and the power of forgiveness. More than any other leader, you stand majestically as the rightful claimant to the title, the father of our nation. I'm paying tribute to you as the recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize. I'm paying tribute to you as the man who braved the cold weather of the Atlantic on Robben Island and the glaring light of the sun that nearly made you blind. I'm paying tribute to you as the man who stood to defy the power of the apartheid state and told them that you will stay your cause for the benefit of your people. From the loins of Gadla Henry Mpaganyiso and the girdle of Nosekeni of the Ngedama of the Amambevu clan, you were born to lead the nation and the world. You washed in the waters of Mbashe River in Mvezo, which you described as a place apart, a tiny precinct removed from the world of great events, where life was lived as much as it had been for hundreds of years. In your veins coursed the royal blood of Mqhekezweni, where you defined your noble station in life to be a plowboy, a wagon guide, a shepherd who rode horses, a short belts and jostled with other boys in stick fighting. I speak of you as a man who chose to be ordinary. At this palace, you lived a life of simplicity when you could have taken advantage of the royal life of golden spoons and gilded existence. From this experience, you learned that in the presence of opulence, the lives of the less endowed were more important than your own. Although you walked tall among kings, queens, presidents, and prime ministers, you never forgot ordinary men and women. You ran your race with distinction, and you now have to take a well-earned and well-deserved rest. We shall always remember you for the favorite theme song, Liza Lisi Dingalako, Fulfill Thy Promise, O God of Truth, which you sang with zest and vigor. As the sweet melodies of this song reverberate, we join you with the composer, Tio Soga, in wishing you smooth passage on your next journey. Today, we call on the voices of Sisulu, of Tambo, of Lutuli, to join you in the melodic lyrics that fill the Wynhoek Methodist Church at our inaugural meeting on 8 January 1912. But it is another song that your impact on the lives of others, and the example that you set where one should also look to. Thus, when Whitney Houston, in her velvety voice, sang the R. Kelly written song, I Look to You, they must have been referring to the example that you have set. As I lay me down, heaven, hear me now. I'm almost lost without a cause. After giving my all, after my strength has gone, and when melodies are gone, if in you I can be strong, I look to you. I stand today to proclaim to the world that although you were ours in the ANC, there are many who have claimed you as their own hero too. You were a man of all seasons, a leader to all of us, a glue that binds us together. We live in the comfort that you and many of our leaders never wavered in your resolve to categorize our struggle as a just one. We have never wavered under your able leadership to tell the world that as we struggle for our liberation, we also struggle for the oppressed people of the world. Now that you are in your eternal sleep, and now that you have breathed your last breath, the world looks back at you with fond memories of a man who captured their imagination. There are those who have nimbler feet, whose memory of your famous Madiba shuffle shall forever consume their own imaginations. There are those of the lettered kind whose abiding memories shall be your sharp pen and excellent wit. There are many who are more inclined to be world of fashion, who will remember your multicolored shirts. Then there are the children who will always remember the love you gave them. Many of us as lawyers remember vividly how you showed how injustice permeated our courts. When you stood in that inquisitorial court to proclaim that you stood accused in a white man's court, you made us realize that the issue of justice was paramount, and until there were equal rights for all, there will never be justice. You were a colossus who led the ANC, our country, during one of the most trying and difficult times of transformation of our country. Some have used similar terms such as titan and giant, who carried a universal message. You contributed immensely to the growth and consolidation of the ANC and our government. You will go down in history as one of the shapers of our democratic state. Even by your own admission, you claim to have been no bigger than other members of the ANC, stating eloquently that you were a member of a collective. But I say, you are first amongst equals. On such occasions of grief, we have to accept that such big men as yourself survive because of the support of even stronger women. There can be no mention of Tata Mandela's achievements without mentioning the sterling roles that were played by your wife, Graça Machel, and your former wife, Winnie. To these strong women and the entire Mandela family, we appreciate how they ensured that the Madiba who are bidding farewell today had comfort, had support, and that throughout your life, you had a shoulder to lean on. Madiba, your long walk to freedom has not ended. It is just the passing of an era. We pick up your spear to continue a long walk towards the economic emancipation for all, so that this economy of ours must reflect the demographics of the new South African rainbow nation. As I close, let me go back to the beginning. Dalibung, Sompich, Madiba, Dlomo, Yemyem, Ngolomsil, Velabempensel. The big tree has fallen. The baobab has fallen. The world will never be the same again. A pledge we make to you, Mr. President, is that as a nation, we will keep on walking. I thank you.
Order. Honorable members, the presiding officers of Parliament associate themselves with the sentiments expressed by the members. We also wish to express our appreciation for the messages of condolences that we have been receiving from parliaments the world over. A special bound copy of members' contribution today will be sent to the family to convey sentiments expressed by Parliament. Books of condolences are available in the following areas: Africa House, the upper foyer and entrance of the National Assembly, and the Queen's Hall in the National Council of Provinces. Ushers are available at the exits to assist guests. Members and guests should please remain at their places until the procession has left the chamber. Once the procession has left the chamber, members are requested to proceed directly to the airport. Can we please, before we do that, can we please rise to observe the moment of silence? Please be seated. Honorable members, that concludes the business of this sitting, and the joint sitting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Nelson Mandela, Nelson Mandela, Nelson Mandela, Nelson Mandela, Nelson Mandela, Nelson Mandela,